thank all the guests who are here to worship with us tonight. I want to thank everyone for the opportunity, giving me the chance to get up here and speak tonight. But tonight I want to start in Genesis 1, verses 26 through 27. It says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them." The Bible tells us we are made in God's image. We have a likeness that is in some ways similar to his. And I think one of those ways is through emotion. We have emotions just like God does. And not only does it create a link between us, but it also demonstrates how real God really is. And this is very evident in the Bible. In many places, especially in the Old Testament, with the Israelites, we see God get angry. In Exodus 4:14, it says, "The anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses," when God called Moses, and Moses then doubted him. Then, after the Lord put up with the unbelief and unloyalty of the Israelites, it says in Numbers 32:13, that the Lord's anger was kindled against the Israelites, and he made them wander in the wilderness for 40 years. Then another verse that we're all pretty familiar with, John 2:15. This is the moment in the Bible when Jesus sees people making the temple into a house of trade. This is where he flips over tables and drives them out with a whip. But we see another emotion of God a lot in the Bible. He's described as a jealous God. It's been seen in many places, especially in the Old Testament. Again, Exodus 34:14 or Deuteronomy 4:24, where it says, "For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God." We also know God to be very, very compassionate. After John the Baptist died, Jesus tries to find a desolate place for himself, but he's pursued by a crowd. Matthew 14:14 says that when he comes ashore and sees this crowd, that he had compassion on them and healed their sick. We also see God express the emotion of sadness. And this is evident in one of the shortest verses in the Bible, in John 11:35, which simply says, "Jesus wept." So in having emotions, we are just like God. And we can see that emotions are good. They're a thing that God created. And they're used for good and for doing God's will. For example, in Philippians 4:4, it says, "Rejoice in the Lord always." Again, I will say, rejoice. Then in Luke 6:35, we are told to extend the love to our enemies. In Ecclesiastes 12:13, it says, "Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." But emotion being a good thing, it's also a two-sided coin. One of the books I'm reading for my classes is the Screwtape Letters. And for those who aren't familiar with the book, it's written by C.S. Lewis. It's about an experienced demon named Screwtape sending letters to his less experienced nephew, Wormwood. In that book, he says that the less dependent humans are on emotions, the harder it is for them to be tempted. So while this emotion is good, a lot of the times we let it get the best of us, as opposed to just feeling. We let our emotions control us. And that's when we start to become really vulnerable. From what I can see, a lot of times we can't really help the way that we feel. And it's all right to feel a certain way, but the trouble really comes when we start to act on those feelings. I think anger is a good example. A lot of times, I've never seen someone who's truly angry be told something, and that one statement alone changes how they feel in that moment. For example, it's okay to be angry, but once you start lashing out and start becoming violent, become very vulnerable to sin. We see this in the Bible, which is in the first 4 chapters. Or we don't get through 4 chapters in the Bible before we see someone murder someone else, is what I mean. In Genesis chapter 4, we see Cain become jealous and angry, and he murders his brother Abel. Then, in Numbers 20, when Moses is angered by the Israelites complaining and quarreling, he calls the Israelites rebels and strikes the rock instead of speaking to it, blatantly disobeying God. We see that God knew this would be a problem for us, or that this would be something important, because you see in Scripture a lot of times where we're told to think about what we say or think about what we act before we do it, despite how we're feeling. For instance, in Psalms 4:4, it says, "Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent. Then in James 1, verses 19 through 20, it says, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every man be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger." It doesn't say do not be angry, it says slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. What got me wanting to speak about this tonight in the first place was just this idea that I had. I was wondering if Satan has a soft side. Think about it. The Bible tells us that demons believe in Jesus and they shudder. So the devil knows who God is. He knows he's fighting a losing battle. He's made hell his home. He knows he's lost a chance of being in heaven. If God and humans are subject to emotion, do you think he is too? Do you think he looks at his own situation and cries about it sometimes? If he does, I think the important note about that is that in the midst of having those feelings, what he decides to do is pull down others with him. That's how Satan acts in response to his own feelings. And that's the exact opposite of how we see God act. In 1 John 4:8, it says, "Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love." 1 Corinthians 16:14 says, let all that you do be done in love. The Bible tells us God is love, and it tells us to do all things in love. God demonstrates love through his many sacrifices, his many blessings, and through just Jesus' actions in general. It shows us that God definitely finds this as important, and him being filled with it and acting in it obviously is obviously a prominent emotion for us to have. So that brings the question, in spite of our feelings, how do we act? No matter how we're feeling, we have to ask ourselves, no matter how we're feeling, is love the dominant emotion in our lives? Or are we allowing other feelings to influence us into harming other people or bringing them down? So what do we do? How do we go about acting righteously despite the ways that we feel? Well, for one thing, I think we just need to take time to think more about what we do before we do it, and think more about what we say before we say it. When we're going about our daily lives, just try to take the time to think, is what I'm about to do or what I'm about to say right, and is it necessary? Another thing we can do is continue to study and pray so that we make our instincts out of love and not out of thoughtlessness. I have a friend back in Colorado who sometimes he'd write on his arm or write on his mirror in the morning the letters ROE, which stands for reason over emotion. We have to let the truth of the Bible be the causes of our actions and not solely our feelings. And lastly, we know ourselves well. We have to plan ahead of time to make sure that we're not doing wrong. We have to avoid vulnerable situations for ourselves and create a safe environment for each other. We don't want to fully rely on other people, but we want to be able to let other people hold us accountable for the things that we say or our actions. And then finally, it's a good thing to just be around those and watch those who are upbeat emotions. I know we have a lot of FC students here tonight, and there's one student in our school, and his name is Solomon, and I was talking to a lot of other students about how we just always see him smiling. It's a person, and whenever you see him, whenever you walk by him, he's always smiling. And that's really encouraging. That's real inspirational. And I think of all the things, it's just a way of us extending love. The simplest thing you can do is just wear a smile on your face despite how you're feeling. But in conclusion, I just want to wrap it up by saying we can't help how we feel. What is important is how we act in spite of how we feel. And we need to ask ourselves, are we like God and letting love dominate our lives? Or are we more like Satan and letting anger and sadness drive us to do evil things? So, to say, I'd like to actually think on these things as we go about our daily lives and go out throughout the rest of this week. And if you're in need of prayer, we ask you to come to the front, or you need to be baptized, we ask you to come to the front. Together stand.